And you've got to remember there's been about 120 odd houses lost in Mallacoota, but fundamentally it's the people in the community and the people on the ground that guide how that recovery happens.
The calm waters of Gypsy Point, just outside Mallacoota, were the site of one of Australia's worst bushfire disasters.
I don't think anyone can kind of explain what it's like until you've been through it. Oh.
CFA volunteer Lynn Harwood was in the radio control room during the fires. Even as the CFA shed caught alight, she kept working.
The dawn came and the fire front was quite close, and then it goes completely dark with this awful red hue. And the fire front hits. And basically that firefight went on then for probably about 3 days.
Her home of 20 years was threatened multiple times. 3 houses burned, but the main village was saved. Mallacoota wasn't so lucky, with 120 homes destroyed. The fires burned for weeks, but Lynn had already turned her mind towards recovery.
Mallacoota is a really strong community with very intelligent people with really good ideas, which are not always compatible. So there have been times in the past where the community has been split and wanted to go in different directions. So I thought it was really critical that we set up a situation to help Mallacoota recover.
She's one of 6 locals who started what's called the Thinking Group, with an idea the town would run its own bushfire recovery, bypassing local government, in the hope it could rebuild and recover faster.
Without the boat, I don't know how I would have saved this here, but this whole bank stayed alight for 5 weeks.
Mallacoota has a long history of going it alone, and the people here pride themselves on their independence.
You can see its footprints over here. When I first came to Mallacoota, we had no policeman. We had 1 school teacher, me. The town was a self-governing body. Mallacoota was its own self. It was wild. You know, the early days of abalone, it was the best place on earth in many ways. Mad as hell, but lovely in its own right. And things have changed now. There's a different population in here, but you know, that same spirit was there in the fires.
Lynn's partner is Indigenous writer and farmer Bruce Pascoe. His property lies on the river upstream from Mallacoota, and it's here he's been rediscovering Indigenous agriculture. The fires wiped out a crop of kangaroo grass that he'd been nurturing for 2 years and was ready to harvest.
It was a huge psychological loss for us to lose that entire crop, but then we got this other brilliant grass came through, so it was like the land was telling us it's okay, you know, this is what Australia's like. You have fire, you have recovery, that's what we got.
The local community is undergoing a similar transformation.
The process was to set up an incorporated body. It would give everyone a level playing field, but it would also be transparent and it would be financially audited, because the hope is that there are grants coming through that would be useful to the community.
This unique approach to bushfire recovery is partly thanks to Bruce's cousin Steve Pascoe, who lost his house at Strathewen in the Black Saturday bushfires.
Of the 100 or so houses in Strathewen, 80% of them were burnt down, and 29 people tragically lost their lives.
With 3 other Strathewen locals, he pioneered a community-led approach to bushfire recovery.
The four of us have worked in government and have worked extensively in communities, and we all knew that if we waited for government to do it for us, then it would take too long, it'd probably be the wrong thing, and it wouldn't do us any good.
They formed an incorporated community association, formally elected by the community.
Hey, how you going?
Hey, lovey.
Nice to see you.
Mallacoota was keen to adopt the model, and Steve was flown in while the fires were still burning.
Because of its isolation, it's probably a really good place for a community-led process to happen.
Mallacoota lies at the edge of the East Gippsland Shire. It's nearly 3 hours to Bairnsdale, where the council sits. And locals here say there's a fraught relationship between the Shire and the town. So when the idea of the community taking on its own recovery was raised, there was overwhelming support. More than 500 of the town's 1,000 residents showed up to the first meeting in February, voting overwhelmingly to create an incorporated community association. It now has nearly 800 members. The committee will apply for available recovery grants and determine how it's distributed to rebuild community infrastructure. This includes support and funding for those who lost their homes.
Mallacoota has had a long and often difficult relationship with the Shire. We have felt that we're not always at the forefront of the Shire's decision-making processes.
East Gippsland Mayor John White supports the committee.
We've had a lot of bridges burnt in this bushfire. Well, hopefully we can build some new ones and get over this.
12 people were elected to the committee in May, including 22-year-old Bryce Watts-Parker, whose family home was destroyed.
This is the block.
Wow.
On the day when we lost the house, we watch it burn to the ground. It's really difficult watching everything that you know and love just kind of being vaporised right before your eyes.
30 years ago, Bryce's parents built the house that stood here. For his mum, Julie Parker, it's still hard to believe.
It's really confronting, actually. You come here and a place that you have brought your children up, had all your Christmases and all your family gatherings, massive part of your life. It's just like a big eraser has come and rubbed out that part of your life, I think.
6 months on, the rubble has only just been cleared.
While you've still got a pile of rubble, it's still your pile of rubble, you know.
Yeah.
But while there's just a bit of dirt, you haven't even got a pile of rubble anymore.
But being involved in the recovery effort has helped them to feel useful.
You've got to remember there's been about 120 odd houses lost in Mallacoota, and it's easier to look to the people within your community for support. You can have people in Melbourne, all over Australia telling you how it's done, but fundamentally it's the people in the community and the people on the ground that guide how that recovery happens.
Tanya de Goose has been elected as the unofficial representative for the farming community at Genoa.
If communities feel that they are being listened to, if they're being consulted with, then I think that recovery process can hopefully happen a little bit more seamlessly and a lot more positively.
She wants more input from local communities in preparing for future fires.
It will be inevitable that we will have more bushfires, probably of increasing severity, and part of our response or part of our preparation for that would be, it would be good to have local employment opportunities come out of that.
Stay there, Bella.
Tanya's father, Rob de Goose, is a second-generation beef producer. 2/3 of the property here burnt.
She's going to bolt. We've got to try and get the community back to where it was. And the worst trouble is, well, bureaucracy won't learn from it. We'll be going through this again in another 20, 30 years, I'm sure. That's the frustrating part. All these fire disasters, we seem to manage them worse every time we progress.
There's been a loss of disaster recovery training for local government or for anyone really. And so we pretty much arose at this year's summer with very little in place.
Disaster recovery is a complex process, and Steve Pascoe says governments aren't equipped for it.
Governments find it quite difficult to resource and develop disaster recovery. It's much longer, it takes years. So if a community is in charge of their own recovery, they can determine timelines, they can advocate for their own needs.
From its early days as a remote abalone fishery, Mallacoota made its own way. Divers were out of work for months after fire destroyed the processing factory. It's been cleared away and a temporary plant put in its place, allowing the fishers to get back to work, although in a reduced capacity.
It's given us some normality back to life of being able to go to work, even if it is restricted limits on daily quotas and weeks on, weeks off, but it's better than the alternative of not having anything at all.
A new factory is seen as vital to Mallacoota's future, and rebuilding plans are underway.
The co-op is part of the town and it has been since the early days. Everybody has come into the co-op to work at some stage or another, so we need the co-op to survive. The town needs a co-op.
50 years after divers banded together to create the co-op, the same spirit of this isolated community is again creating something unique.
There's some really good people that have been nominated on that committee, and it just shows how many good people in Mallacoota that have voted for the right people to go on there. I think it's great.
Mallacoota is a little bit rebellious, but it's also very independent. Really isolated community. No one can ever get to us, and that was indicated by the fire.
We will get through this, that Mallacoota is strong and that the people here are strong and that together we will move on.